because you don't want to have any gap right above right here. We don't want to have any gap right here above this crystal. We want that to be nice and tight, just like that. And so in order to accomplish that, we need to have 2 tiny little beads. Okay? So that's really the most difficult part, to tell you the truth. And now we'll just start whipping out some stringing. But this is the most difficult part, which isn't that hard, right, guys? Is we figure out what we're hanging down here, and then we put the strands together. We put on our focal bead, and then we split apart, and then we start with some tiny beads and, you know, put however many we need until we get to where those will lay directly on our focal next to each other, just like that, with no gap. And that's exactly what we want. Perfect. Okay, so that's what we did in order to start our split out. And from here, we're just going to do basic beading, stringing. And by the way, when you measure, always measure from the top of your split, not the bottom, because this is what goes around the neck. So measuring from the top of the split, we're at 7. So 7 and 7 is 14, and that's fine. We'll fill the rest up with chain. And so when you finish off a split strand, friends, what you're doing is making sure that you're tight down here and you have no gaps. Okay? That's the main thing. And so you put a bead stopper on one side, and we're basically finishing them off as if they're independent of each other, right? Because they actually are, because we split them. We split them off, so this strand has nothing to do with this strand. So like, for example, you know, if this strand, I finished it up and I had a gap in it, it's as you see, it has nothing to do with this strand, right? They're just totally independent of each other. So what you're going to want to do is you just kind of look down here, make sure that your focal is down, touching your loop, which it is, and then we're going to just push this and make sure that little bead, that first little number 1 bead, number 1 millimeter, is touching my focal crystal, and it is. And, you know, you do want to have a little fluidity and movement in your beads, but not as much on a split technique as our regular techniques. And I'm just going to tell you the truth, get rid of a little bit of this wire. It's just a little too much for me. And so I'm going to feed on my crimp, and then I'm going to feed on my wire guardian. And so you put the wire through one side, down the horseshoe, through the little barrel on the other. And then that's what you have, right? Your crimp is down here, okay? And then you'll take either your jump ring or the first part of your clasp, whatever you're using for your connection point, and you'd put it here normally, right? Well, in this case, we're using chain. And then we need to figure out how much chain, but I like to put it on first and put it down on the mat and kind of measure it out. And then we'll cut it from there and see how much chain we need to be cutting. And then we'll just match up the other side. So we'll feed the last link of our chain on the wire guardian. And what's really nice too, guys, using the wire guardians in these techniques when you're combining chain is, especially in this, when you're combining chain, is the wire guardian is going to take all the wear and tear of the chain, right? Not the wire. So the wire guardian is protecting your wire, right? But it's also giving you a nice secure finish. So the wire guardian will take all of the wear and tear for years to come. And so now we'll take our tail, we'll feed it back through our crimp, and of course our first bead. And in this case, that's 2 beads. And again, remember, we're finishing it off. We're finishing each side separate of each other. So we have to be mindful of that. And so we're really going to pull it tight. And then before we go ahead and crimp that off, we'll squeeze that wire guardian, because that'll always give us more play, that we just don't have any gaps down here. We don't want any gaps. We want everything to be nice and flush. And it is. And so now I'll go ahead and crimp that off. We're gonna lay our chain out. And what I do, and I've mentioned this again many times, but for those of you that are new to my channel, I'll mention it in case you haven't watched my previous videos. When I'm finishing off adding chain, I always make sure that my chain is flat. The reason I do that is so that my measurements are correct, and it just is kind of a habit of something that I do. Because, and also when I'm clasping, because of course the chain will twist around on the body, but when you have it flat and you're finishing off, it just has a nice finish to your jewelry. So now again, we're gonna measure only directly from where our split begins. So that first gold bead there, that's where I'm gonna measure from. So if I want a 20-inch, then this needs to be at about 10. And so I will put my ruler right up to that first gold bead, and I will cut my chain at the 10. And then it'll give me a nice, little bit more than 20-inch, because of course we have a clasp, which is probably a 1/2 inch. Yeah, about a 1/2 inch. So that's perfect for me. And so we're gonna cut our chain right there at the 10, get rid of that. And again, I always make my chain flat, feed that last link on the jump ring, and then go ahead and feed it on the clasp. Same thing, I'm gonna straighten out that side, feed it on the clasp, and we're all set, guys. Made a beautiful, beautiful necklace. Just absolutely gorgeous. And so here's what we have, guys. There we go. So we've got just a little bit of chain, so that's just a nice little amount that'll go around like the back of the neck, which is fine. And there we go. We have a nice 20-inch necklace with this beautiful tassel. Oh, I mean, what do you guys think? I am just absolutely crazy about that. That is so gorgeous. That is a really unique look. I love the chain on the bottom and the rest of the gold. Everything kind of just balances, and I'm